Alright, so welcome back to After Effects tutorials. This is still lesson 3, but part 2. I'm going to have you go to your folder and open up your After Effects lessons. Go back to the lesson 3 folder that we left off with last time when we began animations, and open up your After Effects lesson 3. And there it is. And it'll open it right up to where we left off before. Now, to get used to trying to save a different way, we're going to call this Lesson 3 Part 2. So go to File, Save As, and then name this Lesson 3 and just add, comma, Part 2. And now we have a new version of this project. What we're going to do first here is to learn a few things about our composition window. So with my mouse selected, if I am in the composition window itself, it's been selected, so it's highlighted. If I hit the tilde key, which is the weird little squiggle line next to the 1 key on your keyboard, way on the left side under Escape, hit the tilde key once, and this window becomes a full window so I can view things in a larger scale. If I hit it again, then it goes back to normal size. This applies for other windows like the composition panel. If I hit the tilde, I can get a much larger composition, which is helpful if I have a whole bunch of items in this composition to see them all. Hit it again and we're back. Okay, so we still have the Tino Reyes movie in here along with the comp we were working with before. What I'd like you to do now is import the picture called Cloud. I'm going to double click in the project panel and navigating to my training footage, find Cloud and hit open, and the second item comes in. Now I'm going to drop the cloud in below Tino Reyes. Now you can't see it at first because the way After Effects works is like Premiere, and layers on top show over layers on the bottom. If I move cloud to the top, then the cloud would be seen first on top while Tino would be in the background. Now some things to understand about your tools and the toolbar. Let's do that because we haven't really talked about the toolbar. Up in the top is the toolbar. If you don't see the toolbar, simply go to Window. Any window you're looking for can be turned on by simply making sure it's checked. So we have the tools. Again, the mouse obviously will move items around, which changes its position. And to prove that, I'll hit the cloud and hit P to show position. And if I move, the position numbers are moving as well. If I hit the hand, remember that doesn't actually move the position, it just moves where things are located here inside of your composition window. If I hit the zoom or magnifying glass, it will zoom in on any part of the composition, but it will not actually scale up. It's just zooming in. If you notice, the percentage is changing. I can also go back to here and bring it back to fit so it's back to normal. Use my space bar to get the hand. Remember, space bar is another way to get the hand to appear, and I can recenter this. I can also hit the rotation button, which allows me to have things rotate. The item selected on top would do the rotating. If I selected the other item, I could rotate it. I'm going to hit Control-Z twice to put them back to where they were, and hit my hand tool to recenter everything, or spacebar hand. Alright, back to the mouse pointer. Another thing to consider with layering, again with what's on top is what shows, is the transparency switch. Now this can come in handy. Let's go ahead and resize things. So I'm going to take the cloud, click on it, hit the S key for scale, and make it smaller. And then I'm going to use my mouse to drag it over here. I'm going to go to Tino Reyes and hit that file, hit the S key as well, and make it smaller, and then hit the P key to move it over here. Actually, you didn't have to hit the P key, you could just move it because the mouse is positioned. So I've got both files sitting here. The transparency switch comes in handy. This button right here, which is a way to get rid of the background that came with the composition so I can see things a little bit better and how they're all lined up. I'll turn it back on. This drop down is for resolution. Now this is the resolution you're viewing your video at. Full resolution, while it's nice to see things clear, also requires a ton of RAM and slows down your computer and the processor. If you are having problems viewing and having things run cleanly, bring it down to a third or even a quarter. You'll notice it became a little more blurry, but that's not a problem. It will not export like this. It's just so you can work in a mode that saves on your processor and RAM. Okay, so next thing I'd like you to try out is the solo switch. So right now we have 2 layers. Let's say there were 10 layers. It could become confusing as to which items you were seeing, kind of like when you did the picture project and various pictures were sliding through the screen. What you can do in After Effects that's unique is the solo switch. A solo switch is this little dot. If I hit the solo switch, just that layer would appear and everything else in the composition would turn off. If I want to solo more than one layer at the same time, I could solo by clicking on both, and other items, if they were here, would not appear. Okay, turn off the solos. You can also turn off an eyeball to make something go away and come back. If you leave the eyeball off and try to export this video, that item will not be there. So make sure you leave your eyeball on for everything that you want to export. Now, parenting is an interesting part of After Effects, something unique from Premiere, that you can have things follow the leader, sort of a parent-child relationship. There's a little panel here called Parent. Now, if you don't see this, it might be based on some settings that you have with your composition panels. There are some buttons on the bottom that change things that can be seen or not seen. For the most part, there's also a toggle switch. If I hit that, a different set of controls will appear. Okay, keep that in mind. I want to make it so that I can see Parent. I'm going to take the cloud layer and grab this pick whip and drag it to the Tino Rays layer, and that makes the cloud a child to the Tino Rays. Cloud will follow the leader. You can also do this by simply choosing an item from the composition list to parent to, but the pick whip is more visual. So right now the cloud will do whatever Tino Rays does. So if I change Tino Rays' position, you notice the cloud is actually stuck to it. So that's kind of cool to see. Parenting is very, very helpful. Now we're going to go ahead and add a special layer. Normally, if I wanted to add blur to this, I can drop the blur effect right onto Tino Rays, and the same thing with the cloud layer. But what if I want to add an effect to more than one layer at the same time? Well, we can create a special layer called the adjustment layer. So go up to Layer, New, Adjustment. We'll try some of these others later, but for now, the adjustment layer. And that layer now appears. All this layer is sort of a filter that everything below it takes the effect of this layer. Let's try it. So touching the adjustment layer, having it selected, let's go to Effects. Let's go down to Blur and Sharpen. And let's just choose a blur, maybe a fast blur. Now, nothing has changed yet because the fast blur, which has been applied to the adjustment layer, we can see in the Effects controls. Remember, you can also see it down here in the triangle under Effects, but it's probably easier to use up here. If I blur it now, it'll blur everything below the adjustment layer, sort of like an umbrella. Now here's what's interesting is if I move the adjustment layer down below cloud, you would expect to see only Tino blurred because everything under this layer will become blurred and everything above will not. So having an adjustment layer is an easy way to add an effect, a blur, a color correction, whatever you might want to everything. To show this, let's bring the adjustment layer back to the top so both the cloud and Tino Rays are blurred. And let's touch the adjustment layer, go to Effects, Color Correction, and Curves. If I were to make some points on the curves line and change, you see that everything is being color corrected as well because both the adjustment layer has both the blur and the curves effect applied to it. So that's good to know. So adjustment layers are very, very helpful. At this point though, I'm not going to worry much about the changes too much. I'd like you to take curves and delete it, and we'll keep just the blur. Now let's go ahead and just take the adjustment layer off, and we're back to clean video. Let's go ahead and try one last thing then that I'll grade for the final part of this video, which is to see you do an animation along with using parent to a couple of layers. I'm going to click on cloud and delete it. So cloud is gone. I'd like you to click on Tino and change its position to right about here. Okay, now what we're going to do, that still has the effect added to it. I'll tell you what, let's change this. Hit Control Z, which is a great thing to learn. It undoes things. Control Z 1, 2 times to get the cloud layer back. Let's delete Tino instead and keep the cloud. Touch the cloud, move it to about this position. At this point, what I'd like to do is create sort of an intro to possibly a video that you're creating using the parenting tool along with some text. We'll have a more in-depth text lesson in the future, but for today, let's do basic titling. Click on the T. It selects the text. Click in your window here, right about here. Now the size of the text may be small, but we can change that later. I'd like you to change storms are coming. Now, depending on the size that you have for storms are coming, we're going to adjust it. First thing I'd like to do is increase my resolution because it's hard to read. I'm going to go back to my mouse tool and click on one of the handles on the corner of the title so I can make it bigger. Then click and move it. You might notice that this title has created a new layer in the composition. Everything that is in the composition will show up in the composition timeline. So we have storms are coming. Now here's a few things about titles and her handles. The top right handle tends to be the easiest one to work. If I go to the left and try to move it, actually this is working fine. It's based on its centering. If your title is moving around weird and you'd like to recenter it, there is a paragraph panel that's located usually on the side. If I click on it, center is on. I could turn it to right, or sorry, left justification. Again, here's where you need to be careful because the left side just takes off. So the easiest way to adjust, I find, is from the right side. No matter how you want to resize this, make it so it's about this size, saying storms are coming. I don't care what font you use. What we're going to do now is animate both of these items in at the same time so that they appear from the off screen with the red background as maybe an introductory title. So to parent this, let's take the cloud layer and parent to the title layer. And now anything I do to the title layer will happen to the cloud picture as well. I'm going to hit P for position, and I'm going to move these layers off screen by sliding it to the right. So now that the layers are off screen, let's take and make a stopwatch for a keyframe and move it to the home or 0. Went too far. Control Z, move it to home. Okay. Now from here, nothing is happening, so we will make a secondary keyframe. I'm going to zoom out so I can see the entire composition timeline. It's just over a second long. I'm going to come to about 10 frames, and I'm going to now make a second keyframe to move it in. Now if I just slide it, it is slow, so remember, holding down Shift and sliding the number moves things much quicker. I'll let go to adjust it to where I want, and both items come in together. They both will move even though only the title has the keyframes applied to it. The cloud layer is just doing whatever the title layer is doing. If I go back and play it, it slides in. It's a little abrupt. If you remember, how can you make it become a little more smooth moving in? Yeah, that's right. Go to your second keyframe, right click, and let's make it an easy ease keyframe so that it slides in a little more. And then finally, let's turn on the blur so it blurs in as our eyes would normally see a fast moving object. To do that, remember, let's just do the blur on the title because it'll apply also to the cloud because they're parented. I already have the blur button turned on for the whole comp, so if I play it now, oh, you noticed actually the title blurred coming in, but the picture didn't. So we'll turn on the blur for the picture as well so they both blur in and stop. And that is about the end of animating. You already knew how to use keyframes from Premiere. I think you took a step up here, learning how to use it in After Effects. One thing I'd like to remind you on is that while this program, what we're doing so far seems like, well, I could do these things in Premiere. For the most part, that's true, except for real-time blurs and whatnot. But from all the lessons here out, you're going to start using advanced After Effects techniques, and you'll see that these are things that Premiere can't do. So that is the end of Lesson 3, Part 2. Oh yeah, before I forget, please save this project. Make sure that you have Part 2 now, Lesson 3, Part 2 saved to your folder as well for your grade.